What's up guys, it's Tom with Varus Engineering, and today we're going to be installing an AOS on your VB WRX. Alright, so before we get into the installation of the AOS unit itself, we want to talk about a couple features. We do feature a 4-port design, so you have in and out for the block breather, in and out for the PCV system, as well as we do feature a coolant add-on kit that will heat the unit to make sure all of the gross oil vapor that ends up, or at that point won't condense, stays liquefied and drains back into the engine. With an AOS unit, we are looking to remove any of that oil vapor out of the crankcase air that's recirculated back into the intake, thus reducing the potential for detonation and ultimately reduce oil consumption. That being said, now let's get into the install. All right, tools we need to install the AOS. Tape measure to measure the hose, hose cutters to cut the hose, 18mm wrench, 19mm wrench, a Phillips head screwdriver, 21mm socket, 27mm socket, 10mm socket, 12mm socket, a ratchet to go with all of this, a pair of pliers, needle nose probably. You'll need a pick or a screwdriver, something to release the metal rings for the quick connects on the intake, 4mm Allen, and you'll need a pair of vice grips like this, or if you have some of those fancy hose clamps to squeeze or pinch hoses off to keep the coolant from coming out. Last thing we'll need is also a little bit of thread sealant. Kit components for the AOS kit, AOS Drain Kit, and the coolant add-on kit. So for the AOS kit itself, obviously we received some hardware, the mounting bracket, the AOS assembly, and some assorted length of hoses that we'll need to attach or finish the install for that. For the AOS Drain Kit, we have the drain back valve, a barb fitting, a Y connector, and a length of hose to route it back to the AOS. Coolant add-on kit, you have some length of hose, you have the coolant add-on plate, some hose clamps, and then the hardware required, which would include 2 Banjo bolts and then the 2 barbed Banjo fittings. All right, so a couple of things we want to go over before we end up installing this on the car. You will receive your AOS just like this. Now, before we go and install this unit onto the car, I do recommend installing the bracket ahead of time. That is the mounting bracket, of course. And if you want to install this, if you're installing this kit without the coolant add-on kit, which again, we do recommend, you will take 3 16mm button head cap screws with a 12mm washer, and you just want to thread them into the bracket like so. And you will end up installing one here, here, and here. Torque these M6 bolts to 6 foot-pounds. All right, so those of you who opted for the coolant add-on kit, I do recommend installing that now. It makes it a little bit easier once it's in the car. So what you want to do is grab the coolant add-on plate, the black anodized piece I'm holding here. It'll have an O-ring pre-installed. Set that on the back of the AOS, line up all the holes, and then you want your bracket. The side with the 2 holes is the top, and so you'll line that up just like so. Take your 16mm button head cap screws, as I mentioned before. Okay, next step for installing the coolant add-on kit, we want to grab our, set this down for a second, grab our Banjo bolts, these guys right here, and want 2 crush washers. Slide one crush washer over the Banjo bolt, and then we want to get our actual Banjo fitting, the barb fitting. Slide that over, grab your second washer, and basically you want it like this. Please focus. All right. Hopefully that focused. Probably didn't. Next thing we're gonna do is thread them into the 2 ports on the AOS. All right, so in my initial testing and installation, I found that this is the best orientation for the barbs. Once you have this orientation set, you want to torque these to 6 foot-pounds. Now, if you're wondering what that actually means in terms of the orientation, if you can imagine this being the front and the front of the car, you want your banjos kind of facing this direction, all right? So again, these are pointed down and towards the driver's side of the vehicle. All right, so we need to remove the top mount intercooler first and foremost. And basically what we're gonna do is take a series of 12mm head bolts off the car, and we're gonna remove this bracket right here on the passenger side. One thing to note is that we are using these, I call them BMW style connectors, but if you're new to Subaru, or if you're familiar with Subaru, I should say, that these are probably new to you. Yeah, that's the way to say it. So, but this whole process is a lot easier than most WRXs or any generation prior. So, all right, so you'll notice that the intercooler flops around, and now we need to remove this clip here. We basically need to just pry up on this metal ring. I'll show you guys on another piece, a close-up of what's happening here. But basically, I'm just gonna pry up on it, and then the clip will actually sit in 2 grooves that will keep it released so that you can basically just pull it back and remove the intercooler, just like that. All right, with the intercooler out of the way, we have all this area to work, and we're gonna grab our AOS with our bracket and everything that we installed earlier. And there are 2 M6 studs off the firewall. I know this one is hard to see if this stupid AC line is in the way, so just trust me, you'll see them. If you see, this guy, then you'll see this guy right next to it. So we're going to go under the AC line, like so. Line up the 2 studs with the holes on the bracket. Take 2 of your M6 by 1.0 serrated flange nuts. $10mm socket, and tighten these to 6 foot-pounds. Okay, so we got the AOS bolted in on the bracket. Now we're on the top side of the engine. We're looking down. Got the throttle body here, so we're kind of, this is the center of the engine. We're kind of sort of on the passenger side of the center. What we're gonna do is remove the PCV valve and hose. So in order to do, let me get this out of the way so you guys be able to see a little bit better. All right, so we need to remove this hose here. I've already obviously undone the clamp, but you will need a pair of pliers. And then there is another clamp similar to this guy, a spring clamp down here. So needle nose or anything long reach is probably better. So remove that. Obviously you have to take this clamp off as well. I already have them off. Take the hose out, and now let me zoom in. Wrong way. All right, it's out of focus, but you can see the PCV valve right there. All right, so what we want to do for that is grab a 27mm or I believe 1 inch. I'm willing to bet that this will have quite a bit of oil in it, by the way, so make sure to wipe it off when it comes out or you'll be dripping oil everywhere. Okay, so we have our PCV valve removed. Now we need to locate our 1/2" to NPT adapter. I realize it's a little out of focus, but it's either this or the installation area. So we are going to use a little bit of PTFE, liquid tape or thread sealant. And we need to apply this to the threads on our fitting. Let me wipe off the excess and show you guys. Okay, so we have our fitting right here. Don't need a lot, just need enough to fill threads a little bit. All right, so our PTFE is applied just like the first 2 threads. Again, that's the Permatex liquid Teflon stuff. Now we're gonna install this into our threaded hole on the block where we took the PCV out. All right, cool. After a solid 5 minutes of struggle bussing, we've got the fitting down here, you can see started. We're gonna use a 21mm and an extension, and we're gonna tighten this bad boy up. These are tapered threads, so don't wanna overdo it. Bang. Now we've got the PCV adapter assembled.
Hi everyone, Doug here from Various Engineering, and today you're joining me for this video where we go over our revised design for our air oil separator for our VB WRX. We've got this new design which is available right now, which we found to be much more efficient than the original design. So let's get on with the video. All right, now we are going to refit this hose. However, it was oriented like that before, but we're going to twist it this way. Get it nice and tight, so we're going to have the end that was connected to the PCV valve facing to the strut, to the wheel. We're going to get it nice and tight. Get our pliers, put the clamp on, and then we can reconnect any connectors that we had disconnected to get better access. And now we're going to take our PCV valve and put it into the other end of the hose and tighten the clamp. So we just move it up. Now that we have the PCV valve installed, we are going to, as you can see, we've applied some thread sealant, and now we're going to fit the adapter. So just screw it on, offer it up by hand. So it goes tight with your hand, and then I use 2 adjustable wrenches here, just makes life a little easier. So one goes on there, and then we're just going to hold this one steady, and just once again, just when it goes tight, just go about 1/4 of a turn more. So there we go, that's installed. And then we're going to take approximately a 9-inch cut of 1/2-inch hose, and we're going to put it on the second barbed connector for the air oil separator, and then the PCV adapter. Make sure it goes on nice and tight, put it on all the way to the end, and that's installed. Next we take approximately a 21-inch length of 1/2-inch hose, put it on the first barbed connection for the air oil separator, and then feed it under the hose line for the PCV valve, and then we put it onto the barbed connector on the top of the engine block, where the original, which was the original location for the PCV valve. Once again, push it on, make sure it's on firmly. Now, if you want to run your air oil separator with the oil drain kit installed as well, I'm going to show you how you can do that. So you'll receive the kit like this, which comes with additional piece of 1/2-inch hose, a Y-piece connector, and then the appropriate adapters so that you can connect it into the bottom of the air oil separator. So I'm going to show you how you can do that really quickly right now. So what I would advise doing is getting some rag and lying it underneath the air oil separator here, because when we remove this plug, we're probably going to get a little bit of oil coming out of it. So that'll just protect the electrics that are underneath. So if we unscrew this plug, there it is, removed. I'll come and show you nice and close. What we're going to want to do is keep a hold of this O-ring, because we're going to be transferring that to our adapter. Now that we have it removed, we can see that the big difference between the plug is that it is solid, and then the drain has a hole through the middle. So we're going to transfer this O-ring over. It's really simple, comes off really easily, and just place it on top of there. Now when you fit this back to the car, you want to be careful that it stays in place. If it moves off or comes down here, we'll have an incorrect seal. We might also crush the O-ring and essentially render it useless. So we want to be careful when fitting it back in the car. So now we have that O-ring installed, we're going to take the second O-ring from our kit here and our adapter for the 1/2 inch hose. And we're going to push that on beyond the threaded section, you can see here. And then we're going to screw it on to the plug, but we're going to make sure as we're screwing it that it's not crushing. Make sure it's got a good seal. And to be honest, we only need to go as tight as hand tight with it off the car here. And then that is ready to go back on the car. So to install this, it's really simple. It's just the reversal of removing it. So we're going to find the threaded section at the bottom of the AOS, and we're just going to start it by hand. We're going to do it by hand anyway. But start it, and once it's going, we can go a bit quicker. And then just doing it by hand until it can't move anymore. You don't have to go crazy, just as long as we've got a good seal, which looks like we do. And then we're going to move on to fitting the Y piece and the additional hose. Now we're going to remove the hose from the 1/2 inch barb that we have where the original PCV valve was. So just going to pull up on that. Might come up with a pop, but nice and slow. It will come off real nice and easy and smooth. We're going to pull it out from underneath the second line where the PCV valve is. And then what we're going to do, we're going to cut approximately 7 inches from this end, and that's where we're going to be fitting the Y piece. Now that we have cut our hose to length, I've reinstalled it on the adapter we have down here for where the PCV valve was originally located. And I'm going to fit the hose to the bottom of the air oil separator now. I'm just going to spray a little bit of WD-40 on the inside, just a teeny bit, and that's going to help me move it on and off and help me to install it with a little bit more ease. So I'm going to feed it underneath, slide it up, perfect. It will allow me to twist it too. It just gives me a little bit more freedom for making adjustments. So we're going to have it fed underneath this vacuum line for the brakes, and in fact we're just going to spray a little tiny bit of WD in this end. You can even just get it on your finger and spray it in the other hoses. Then we're going to install the Y piece. So the single exit that goes to where the adapter for the PCV valve is on top of the engine block, and then the two other ends, hold on a second, this needs to be routed, if you can remember from earlier, underneath. I'm going to route that there and there. I'm going to make sure all the clearance is fine, not rubbing on anything. But it really is As easy as that, and that is installed.
All right, next we need to remove the OEM breather line, which is this plastic one. I cut it in half here for demonstration purposes, but obviously this will be one piece. Put my prop down. Need to remove the factory air duct. Okay, so now we need to remove this line. Again, should be one piece, mine's cut in half. We also might want to remove this charge pipe as well, okay? That'll be totally up to you. If you can't snake this pipe out, then go ahead and remove this. And basically, to remove this charge pipe, it is going to be one 12mm bolt. Down here, I will, against the timing cover, and I will show you guys that as a close-up in a second. And then the connection to the turbo is going to be the same as when we removed this clip here. You gotta basically pop the metal ring upwards and get the metal ring in the indents, and then you can basically pull up on this tube. We'll show you guys that in a second. But we need to remove this hose from both sides of the fitting. So in order to do that, I have another version of it right here. And what we do, or what Subaru has done, is basically pressed on this nylon or plastic line onto these quick connect fittings. And what we want to do is basically take a razor blade and cut a slit just from here to here. As long as you can see these little ribs, that's as long as you need to make the slit. As you start making that cut, this will begin to separate. And as it separates, you can work this thing loose, and then you'll be left with this. And this is where we're gonna put the 1/2" hose that goes from the AOS on both sides. All right, so once you make that slit or the cut in the line, go ahead and pull it apart. Now, since this line is already technically ruined, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't just be a problem to cut it in half. That's gonna make your life a lot easier. So cut it here. Actually, probably cut it down here before this bend. That way, once you get the bottom unclipped, you can pull it right out, right? So we want a little bit of play in this because we're gonna run the hose where this factory line is currently. So if you look, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to see, but down here with my other hand, between the two cam phasers, okay, there will be a 12mm bolt, and it'll be pretty obvious that it's the one holding this on. All right, it's about that long, or it is that long, I should say. And that's gonna give you a lot of wiggle room here. Again, you don't have to take this fully off if you don't want to, but if you do, we're gonna go over removing the clip for the quick connect down the bottom. All right, so here we are on the front corner of the car, kind of moving in here. All right, and as we get closer, you can begin to see, zoom in, see these guys here. Those metal tabs are the tabs that we need to release. All right, we got the charge pipe removed, so now we can see the OEM hose. Yours will have like an insulator on it. Mine does not, because I took it off. And then if we look down here, grab a light. Get this thing to stay in the right spot. And now, this is the guy we need to get loose, okay? So what you want to do is the same as before, make a slit and pull this thing off. All right, so just a slice right there, and then work this tube back and forth and pull it off. And then you're basically left with a nice hose barb. All right, grab your 39.5" 1/2" hose, and we're gonna run it from the, oops, got this flipped. From the fitting on the driver's side closest to the middle. Remember, use lube so that you can get it past this big hose here. And I'm gonna run it under both of the hoses. Ultimately, hose routing is up to you, whatever looks best to you. Underneath this thin guy here. And we wanna put this hose in the same spot that the OEM hard line if you want to call it that, was. So basically kind of like this, and we'll show you that afterwards as well. Then we're gonna plug it in to that connector that goes into the intake. And last but not least, 35-inch, half-inch hose, and we're gonna put this from the block breather to the last fitting, or the closest fitting to the driver's side on the AOS. This time, we are gonna run it in between the two manifold runners on the passenger side. And basically, you're just gonna feed it through until it's right behind the alternator. There's a little connector down here. You'll be able to see that. You wanna be above that connector. You can see right here, I'm on both sides of the manifold, okay? And grab your lube. I'm actually using PV Blaster, which is probably not advised, but it's a test car. All right. Now we have all of our AOS lines run. All right, so at the beginning of the video, we pre-installed the Banjos for the coolant add-on kit. So here's what it basically looks like when it's in the car. Obviously you can't see this because of the firewall, but what we want to do is install two of the hoses that are provided. You want to make sure one is 32 inches and one is 30.5 inches. The 32-inch hose should be on the, so if it's in the car like this, the Banjo that is closest to the driver's side, so this guy here, okay? The 30.5-inch one should be on the passenger side, and you want that hose routed down like that. Ultimately, you can have it like this, but this is going to be a bit of a rough edge, and over time, we just want to make sure there's no chafing to go through that, that hose. So slide some clamps over it and put the hoses on, and go ahead and tighten the clamps down now, and then we're going to move to the car. Okay, so AOS is in the car. We have the hoses installed on the AOS. Obviously you can see them here just hanging out. What we're going to do is replace this hose that's going to the throttle body and putting the AOS in line with it. So we're going to remove this hose completely from the car, and in order to do that, we're basically going to clamp the line off. We haven't drained any coolant, so hopefully we don't get any or very minimal leakage out of here. But we're gonna pull this off, and as it's in the car, you'll see one of the hoses that we installed will be roughly the same length. So we're basically gonna kind of do a little U-turn here. So just be prepared. The contents of the hose, if you don't clamp it on both ends, obviously, is going to evacuate like it did right there. But no big deal. Just a little bit of coolant. Just like that. All right, so once we've made those connections for the coolant hoses going from the AOS to the hard line on the back of the driver's side cylinder head and the throttle body itself, go ahead and tighten up those clamps to make sure we have a leak-free connection, and that'll wrap it up for the coolant add-on kit install, which will also wrap up the entire install. So today we did the AOS kit install along with the AOS Drain Kit and the coolant add-on kit. And it goes without saying, make sure you reassemble the vehicle back in reverse order, and make sure that you have the hoses kind of secured in a relatively good spot where they're not going to get pinched or chafed or you know, just generally rubbed through or anything like that. Go ahead and use the supplied zip ties that are included in the hardware kit. And so once you have the vehicle wrapped up and have all the OEM parts reinstalled, that's gonna wrap it up for the install. I keep saying wrap it up. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, be sure to email us at sales@veris-engineering.com. And until next time, we'll see you later.